Hey, it's Lynn, and welcome back to Anatomy of a Pelikula, my ongoing one woman, one movie at a time campaign to get more international audiences watching Filipino cinema, disguised as a humble YouTube series. Today's subject is a film that occupies a very specific place in Filipino millennial culture, not a mainstream studio blockbuster like One More Chance, which I have dissected in a previous video, which I will link down below, but instead a scrappy, hard fought independent film that nearly didn't get the theatrical run it deserved, and it ended up defining an entire subgenre anyway. That film is JP Habak's 2017 debut, I'm Drunk, I Love You. So let's pour ourselves a metaphorical drink and take this one apart, piece by piece. Just a quick heads up, as always, before we dive in, this is a full spoiler film dissection. That said, I won't be covering every single detail, so it's still worth watching the entire movie yourself to catch the nuances that I didn't and couldn't get to. So, anyway, let's get started. In the film, we follow Carson, played by Maha Salvador, who has spent 7 years quietly in love with her best friend Dio, played by Paolo Avellino, without ever telling him. Days before their college graduation, a spontaneous road trip to a music festival alongside their friend Jason, played by Dominic Rocco, becomes the setting where years of unspoken feelings finally rise to the surface, testing what their friendship actually is and how it can survive. The film's first act is devoted to establishing the specific texture of Carson and Dio's friendship, and it does this primarily through music rather than exposition. Long before either character says anything explicit about their feelings, the film has them performing duets together, trading song preferences, and communicating through shared musical taste, which functions as the couple's true native language throughout the film. This is a meaningful directorial choice. Rather than relying on dialogue to establish intimacy, Habak treats music as its own narrative device, letting a shared OPM, original Pinoy music, soundtrack carry emotional information the characters themselves aren't yet willing to say aloud. The road trip itself, undertaken on the threshold of graduation, is staged as a liminal space in the most literal sense, a temporary suspension between the structured world of college and the unknown that follows it, which mirrors the suspended, undefined nature of Carson and Dio's relationship. The film's second act is where its most distinctive formal choices take over. Central to this section is an extended drinking game sequence shot largely in a long, uninterrupted take in which Carson grows progressively more intoxicated and progressively more emotionally unguarded. That sustained, unbroken shot is doing real technical work. But refusing to cut away, the film denies itself the usual editing tools that might soften or stylize Carson's unraveling, forcing the audience to sit inside her vulnerability in something close to real time. It's a technique that trades polish for intimacy, and it's very much in line with Habak's stated intention to depart from the genre's more conventionally cute visual language in favor of something closer to lived experience. That vulnerability builds toward the film's central turning point, Carson's confession. When she finally tells Dio how she feels, the moment is disarmingly plain rather than dramatically staged. And Dio's response, an attempt to kiss her, disoriented and half drunk himself, initially seems to promise the reciprocation the entire film has been withholding. But Carson recognizes almost immediately that his gesture isn't born of love, but of something closer to pity. A well meaning but ultimately hollow attempt to soften the blow of rejection with physical affection. This is arguably the film's most quietly radical move. Rather than let the audience enjoy even a brief illusion of requited love, it has its protagonists see through the gesture in real time and refuse it, choosing painful honesty over comforting fiction. It's a rare instance of a romantic film explicitly distinguishing between being desired and being pitied, and trusting its lead actress to communicate that distinction through restraint rather than a dramatic outburst. I think it was a genius move. The third act settles into the aftermath of that refusal, and it's here that the film most clearly departs from genre convention. Dio ultimately reconciles with his previous girlfriend, Pathy, played by Jasmine Curtis Smith, rather than turning toward Carson, and the film resists framing this as a fully tragic or even fully resolved outcome. Instead, its closing movement is built around silence. A final scene between Carson and Dio that relies almost entirely on unspoken gesture, shared glances, and eventually a laugh that seems to hold both grief and release all at once, rather than the conventional emotional conversation. That reliance on silence as its own expressive device, several critics have compared its restraint to the closing moments of other quiet, wordless romantic dramas, allows the film to end on ambiguity without feeling unresolved. Carson isn't granted the relationship she wanted, but she is granted something the film treats as equally significant: the ability to let go of a 7-year hope without that letting go being staged as defeat. The deeper meaning threaded through all three acts is a fairly direct challenge to one of the genre's most persistent assumptions: that sustained devotion should eventually be rewarded with requital. I'm Drunk, I Love You spends its entire runtime building emotional investment in exactly that outcome, only to withhold it deliberately and to suggest instead that loving someone for years without being loved back the same way is not a failure state requiring correction, but a real, valid, if painful, human experience in its own right. The film's genuine subject, as several critics have noted, is less romance itself than the friendship that survives or doesn't quite survive, an unbalanced emotional exchange. And its final image is concerned less with who ends up together than with who's still standing and still speaking to each other once the confession has been made and answered. Culturally, the film's significance within the Filipino rom-com drama arc is considerable, and it's tied closely to a broader movement often described by Filipino audience as hugot cinema, a term drawn from the Filipino word for something pulled or drawn out from within, used to describe films, lines, and social media posts that traffic in raw, confessional heartbreak. Habak has spoken openly about wanting to depart from the genre's most formulaic, conventionally cute style, and I'm Drunk, I Love You became one of the clearest, most influential examples of that shift. A film built on quotable, aching dialogue and unresolved emotional honesty rather than tidy romantic closure. Its impact extended beyond its content, too. Despite strong reviews, the film was initially given a limited theatrical release of only 60 cinemas nationwide, prompting public frustration from its own cast in a grassroots fan campaign organized under the hashtag #SaveIDILY, urging theaters to expand its run. That campaign itself, a small but telling data point about the Filipino indie film ecosystem, a story of audience devotion actively reshaping a film's commercial life in a landscape still dominated by major studio productions. What ultimately makes the film linger with audiences is how precisely it captures a very particular, very common adolescent into adulthood experience: loving a close friend for years without ever finding the right moment or the right courage to say so, and having to reckon all at once with both the confession and its answer. It resonated so specifically with Filipino millennial audiences like myself, navigating the same threshold between the boundless expression allowed to college friendships and the more defined categories demanded by adult relationships, that its lines and its central drinking game scene have circulated online for years since release, closer to shared cultural shorthand than to conventional movie quotation. In refusing to grant its central pairing a clean romantic ending, the film ultimately argues something more useful than trying to get your love to love you back. That surviving unrequited love with your friendship and your dignity intact is its own quietly significant kind of happy ending. And so that's it. I'm Drunk, I Love You is up on YouTube in full. I will try to link it down below. So make sure that you keep a drink nearby when you watch it if you're feeling thematic, and see for yourself what an entire fan campaign fought to keep in theaters. Films like this are exactly why I want more people outside the Philippines watching Filipino cinema. So please watch it, share it, talk about it, and I would love to interact with you down in the comment section below. So let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. You are awesome. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.